So Flechas do Brasil will be doing it there.
Just so I know the audience, how many of you have been to Brazil before or are Brazilian? Okay. And how many of you have not been to Brazil, but really want to go? Okay, excellent. So that's where I was, I don't know, probably, I grew up in Maryland, outside DC, from when I was probably 5 years old and even knew about Brazil till, my first trip in 2007. And the same for my wife. My wife's Israeli. When I first met her, her big thing was, we got to do our honeymoon in Brazil. We got to do our honeymoon in Brazil. We have to decide to get married in June. That's not a good time to go to Brazil, as many of you know. So we went to Asia instead. But my first trip to Brazil was in 2007. We basically, I flew down. I was in New York at the time. Flew down to Sao Paulo. People had kind of told me about Sao Paulo and kind of being the concrete jungle. They were right. But there's obviously a lovely park right in the middle. It was nice to go for a little jogging. And, went from company meeting to company meeting. What I found was so fascinating was, people start a little later, which was good because I'm a later person. But man, dinner started at 9 o'clock. We went through midnight, went beyond midnight. It was pretty unbelievable. And then I went from, this is kind of November 2007, then I went from Sao Paulo to Rio, flew into that amazing airport, best airport in the world. How many of you have taken that flight from Sao Paulo to Rio? That is just unbelievable. I wish my camera was good enough to take the photos from that. Ended up landing, it was a beautiful sunny day. And then actually I was supposed to fly back that night, but it started raining out of nowhere, which actually was great. So I got stuck in Rio overnight, which actually was much better to be stuck in than Sao Paulo. And had a wonderful evening in Rio out till very late. And then it came time to leave. And I was traveling with one of my partners at the time. As we talked about concrete jungle, traffic is not one of the most positive aspects of Sao Paulo and of Brazil. And my partner was a little bit less patient than I was. And so we decided, it was about 4 hours before our flight, started to get in the road, and my partner wanted to take a helicopter. And I sat there and I was like, helicopter? Okay, that sounds great, but this is Brazil. I don't know about helicopters. I'm not following the Gracie diet, but I do want to live, quite a long period of time. And so I ended up, we decided, to get on the road. Didn't move. It was during one of those national holidays. And we sat there and we ended up going to the side of the road, and literally our driver called up some random helicopter pilot. Literally, I guess there's helicopters everywhere, as you guys know. And I'm boarding a helicopter, flying all the way there, and the entire way, we were sitting in traffic, pulled over. The entire way, my partner sat there and said nasty words to me about how I had him sit in traffic for quite a while, how he went on this helicopter. As I was boarding the helicopter, I was texting my wife, I love you. I don't know if I'll make it, but I'll hopefully see you on the other side. Got in the airport, and lovely sat there for 4 hours in the airport in Sao Paulo, Rio, till our flight. Had lovely salami sandwiches. One of the arguments I made with my partner was that there's the best sushi places in the world in Sao Paulo, so I could definitely justify taking the helicopter if we were going to go for a nice meal at a sushi restaurant, and then ultimately get there. And to that day, my partner said, I'm never going back to Brazil. And I said, that's great, because I am. And now it's been 24, 25 trips since 2007. As a firm, we made 10 investments in Brazil. Invested close to about $2 billion. And it's been awesome. And I love it. And I don't take helicopters anymore. So I'm glad it's been a great time. Let me give you some quick background on General Atlantic, in case you just know there's a little bit of marketing, so bear with me for 30 seconds. So we basically been around for 33 years, managed about $18 billion. We write kind of $50 million to $500 million equity checks. We invest across 5 sectors. So I go in, we do internet technology. We also do financial services, healthcare, business services, as well as consumer retail, particularly in emerging markets, as well as a little bit here in the U.S. These are some of the companies that we've invested in: Box, Priceline, your Stock Exchange, E-Trade, First Republic Bank. How many of you have a mortgage from First Republic Bank? Tory Burch was actually our largest investment last year for the ladies in the room. I can't offer discounts, so I apologize.
Mercado Libre, which is an investment we made in Argentina, but very proud of what they've done in Brazil and Latin America. Last year we invested in Decolar, hopefully when you're booking your travel to Brazil, using Decolar. Bond, which is a software company out in the Netherlands, Springer, got a great portfolio in China as well. We basically invested in almost every continent out there. If you ask people in the firm what continent we're most excited about, leaving currency aside for a moment, it's absolutely Latin America. And so we've invested quite a bit of resources in building our effort. We opened our office almost 10 years ago, made it more of an advisory office until 2007 when we started really ramping up our efforts. We have about 7 investment professionals today. In Sao Paulo, we've been very active looking at Mexico. We've made kind of 10 investments, markets I mentioned. And we're looking actively at more. We think it's a great market for us because it's all about growth, entrepreneurship, founders. We love investing in founder-owned companies. And there's just dynamic growth across so many different sectors in Brazil. That's really what we've gravitated to. And we make minority investments, we make majority investments, so we're very flexible as to how we invest. These are the companies we invested in Latin America specifically. I've been active in all the internet technology companies. Actually, most recently, I don't know, how many of you are Smiles members? Smiles? Good. Excellent, I like that. We all used to be multi-plus members, now we fly gold, good or bad. And so we are big advocates of what's going on there, just great business models in the frequent flyer market. One of the companies, Lynx, any of you guys familiar with Lynx at all? It's a business that is really, I've spent a lot of time here. I had our Palo Alto office right downtown there in Silicon Valley. And I've looked all over the world in markets for software as a service kinds of business, cloud businesses, subscription term license businesses. And Lynx is all of that, but it's, and actually we find in the US, a lot of those companies don't make any money. They basically, they burn through cash, they're doing sales and marketing, they raise lots of venture capital. What I love about Lynx is it's all of those things except they make 30% EBITDA margins. And they were a founder-owned company, with the first, along with BNDES, were the first 2 outside investors in the company. We ultimately just took that company public here in Brazil, and a lot of my friends in Brazil were really closely watching it because there haven't been that many IPOs in Brazil, and Lynx just went out a few months ago, and it's been very positive received. Stock's up almost 40%, and it's just a great case study for other technology companies in Brazil. We're hopeful our company, Mercado Libre is still kind of the main company in the e-commerce area traded here in NASDAQ. We're hopeful Decolar will be kind of the next great Latin American and Brazilian internet company when it hopefully goes public in the next couple of years. What we love about Brazil is all the things that you guys know, right? We think it's going to be the 4th largest economy in the world in a matter of a few decades from now. But we're long-term investors. We've been around 33 years. We expect to be around even longer. And we love the fact that there's just a burgeoning middle class. We all talk about C, D, and E consumers. Obviously, A and B consumers continue to keep growing. And we found plays like Tory Burch is opening stores in Brazil and Latin America to play against kind of the higher net income folks. We can play that globally. And then we've been looking very actively at kind of C and B level classes, consumer companies that really address that. We think in some ways Smiles, in some respect, is better placed for kind of being a retail coalition program as opposed to just a free flyer program. And so we've been very active in looking at different companies and markets in there, including retailers and so forth. We basically are very thematic. So what we love is consumer spending, right? So we had investment in a company called Paula Corp, which was a leading private health insurance brokerage company. And ultimately that company is now a public company in Bovespa. And so we saw that, if you look on the left side, just healthcare spending is continuing to grow. There's a private healthcare system. So that's been a big theme we've been looking at in Brazil. Everything from drugstores, pharmacies, hospitals, all sorts of kind of privately oriented healthcare opportunities. We love consumer trends, and we've made a number of investments in financial services and asset management and all things. Most recently last year, XP Investimentos, if you're familiar with that company, which is, we think it's more of an offline brokerage today, but we think There's aspects that we saw with E-Trade 10 years ago, 15 years ago, that we think we can bring to something like XP in terms of driving real innovation in the brokerage market. Internet, I think these are all the things that you know about. We think, obviously mobile penetration, smartphones, we're still in a very early stage of development in that market. All of our companies, every board meeting for DECOR, we're talking about how much of the traffic is going through mobile phones and through smartphones, how much is on tablet. Clearly, that's where the future is, both here and around the world, and so that's actively something that creates a real opportunity for Brazilian internet technology companies, given they know the local nuances. They're building for the Android platform in most respects, and also for Apple and iOS, and we think that's going to be something that's going to continue to drive future opportunities. And then the last, which we haven't really found a way to play, although I've joked a little bit with Harold about some of the things that we could maybe do in this area, is natural resources. And we think that clearly is a huge strength for Brazil. It's just a matter of time when we find an investment opportunity in that area. We've looked at agriculture, we've looked at sugar and ethanol-based technologies, and so we think that's a neat opportunity for us. I think for the investment themes, I won't go into that many specifics, but I talked about kind of the three main ones we're going after. But that's what we're doing. That's our strategy.
Great. Thank you so much, Brad. Please sit down. So Brad is going to be joining the panel, and I would like also to invite Roy Carthy from Initial Capital. He's going to be moderating this panel about entrepreneurship in Brazil, and I'm very happy to have Roy here. Roy created the Brazilian Pavilion at TechCrunch Disrupted, and he's coming from a very busy week. And Brazilians outnumber everybody else again this year. Congratulations, Roy. So please sit down, and I want to also invite Anderson Tees, founder of Redpoint eVentures, to join us, as well as Alan Taylor from Endeavor. I'm very excited to have you all here. And while I let Roy talk a little bit about his background and what he does, I'll pull the slides of Alan and Anderson, okay? All right. Yeah, well, you have to right here at the table, but...
All right, so this is the last panel of the day, and if you've been here, if you flew in from Brazil, this is literally the last panel of the week. You've seen probably at least Anderson and I about 6 times, right? At least, so, we were... Yeah, well, we need new jokes and new material, it sucks. So we're going to do this a little differently. It's last panel. Let's get kind of a little more energetic before we all go home. I'll get you out of here in time, not just because necessarily I care about you, but because I have to get my brother on a plane. So, sort of important. Jewish mother, it's a start. Trust me. And another thing. Let's kind of do the questions as we go. So if somebody says something interesting or smart, or you want to challenge them, let's just kind of wave to me, and I'll run up, and I'll give you the mic, and we'll do it like that. Are we all cool? Yes? Excellent. So just kind of go down the line, quick bio, and we'll start.
Should we let Alan start with his presentation? Yeah?
No.
Yeah.
No.
No, we won't have
No. It couldn't possibly be interesting.
More interesting than thought.
Yeah,
All right.
Go ahead.
My gift to you is no slides.
Thank you.
My name is Alan Taylor. I work with a group called Endeavor. Endeavor supports high growth, we call them high impact entrepreneurs in emerging markets all over the world. We're in 17 different countries. 6 of those are in Latin America, and we've been working in Brazil for about 11 years now. So how many people in the audience have actually heard of Endeavor in Brazil? Okay, so we're on the right track to something. My role actually run an office for us here in San Francisco. We have a small team in Silicon Valley that connects our portfolio of 500 companies all over the world to great mentors and investors like Jay here in the Valley and elsewhere. So I'm excited to be here and hopefully do something interesting that doesn't involve jiu-jitsu or fighting or whatever. Or judo. Yeah. I mean, now that you've already filled out your survey saying what you thought of the conference, and you're going to die because you have to go out for lunch, we present the last panel.
Hi everyone, great honor to be here. My name is Anderson Thies. I'm the co-founder of Redpoint eVentures, which is a venture capital firm in Brazil. It's a new one. We started a year and a half ago. We raised our first fund. It's $130 million focused for investments in Brazil and the region. And we invest in the internet sector. We are a joint venture of two funds from the Silicon Valley. So that's why we got our long name, Redpoint eVentures. These are our sponsoring funds, and they help us a lot. I'll walk you through a little bit of our mission, but basically what we want to do is very much in line with what Bay Brazil does, which is we are bringing the Silicon Valley style of venture capital investing to Brazil. So that's why we created the fund. That's why we have these set up with a local team and a local fund in Brazil with close ties here with the Silicon Valley. And we invest in early stage companies, what we call Series A, so it's the first institutional round of investment in the company. So we like to say we invest in very big companies when they are still very small. When they are big, we bring them to guys like from GA and Red, so that we can keep growing the businesses. So the idea is to invest in companies with really big potential to grow not only in Brazil, but also in the region. And really honored to be here. Happy to take any questions you might have.
Thank you.
All right, we already gave my background.
Okay, finally about me, my name is Roy Carthy, or as my hotel prefers, Rio Cartney. I'm managing partner of Initial Capital. We invest in Israel and in Brazil. It's a fun combination, but it's a result of the background of the founders rather than an intelligent strategic perspective. Although I have to say that as time goes by, we find it's actually making more and more sense and less surprising. But I have to say it was more the background, our personal background, than anything else. So with that out of the way, we're looking at the new wave, and I'm an internet guy, so I apologize, you guys write different checks for different things, but I'm more of an internet guy, so when I speak of startups and technology, I'm more in that kind of world. So let's go back to the 25 trips of yours in Brazil, and sort of the new wave that we're seeing now in Brazil, which is can be categorized anywhere from between like 5 and 3 years ago where it began. So what are you seeing? What are you all seeing as different since since 2007, let's say?
Yeah, sure. I'll give my perspective, and like we talked about, it's a later stage perspective in Anderson and Alan. But I think it's fascinating. I mean, I remember my first trip, our first investment in America was Mercado Libre. And very much, kind of Marcos, Hernan, Nicolas were kind of pioneers. I mean, they had the help of Endeavor, Alan's organization, to really get going and get started. But there weren't as many entrepreneurs at that time. And they kind of, as you see here in Silicon Valley, a lot of it is kind of learning from those that have made the mistakes before you and really, kind of seeded that ground. And so what I found more recently, although actually Decalar was also started in the same kind of vintage around 99, 2000, in the case of Mercado, as they all kind of banded together from their time here at Stanford, we saw what was going on at eBay. The Monte guys had banded together from their time at HBS, and the Stanford guys kicked their ass. And then McGuire. I think in that situation, they made a lot of mistakes along the way. I mean, Mercado Libre, in many ways, I think, was able to kind of thrive through that period. But I think now you have an environment where you have guys like Kazakh Ventures, that are former Mercado Ventures, and what Anderson and Redpoint folks are doing. You've got Mondashis. You've got a number of really interesting entrepreneurs and folks that have done it before that can offer that advice, that guidance, that capital to help really drive the next group of startups. And so that's been really encouraging. And so every time I go down to Sao Paulo, Rio, and even Argentina and VA, you see these really interesting companies that are all emerging, and they all started maybe in some ways they were ideas that they saw from the time here in the U.S. But in many ways, I think the next leg of trips that I've seen are really innovative ideas that are very specific to that local market. Yet, bring some of the best practices that you see, coming from Silicon Valley. So I'm very encouraged. I mean, I think just the level, I'd say it's, I don't know if it's 10x or 20x from the startup activity that I see in Brazil versus my first couple trips. But it's very encouraging.
So I come from a completely different angle. I'm Brazilian, born and raised. I lived some time abroad, and since I went back to Brazil 10 years ago, I've been working either as an investor or running internet companies in Brazil. So it's, there's an internet bias to that as well. But I can tell the ecosystem in Brazil changed dramatically in the last few years, especially in the last 3 or 4 years. Not a coincidence, the market in Brazil changed a lot as well. So around 2008, 2009, we started to get critical mass in the Brazilian internet. We start building significant businesses. And in terms of how much can be built, it's if we look at the size of the Brazilian economy and the amount of gaps, amount of problems, amount of opportunities we still have to tap into the country, I think we are still in the very early days. Some funds were pioneers. I think, if I recall correctly, Doug was back in 2007. I was at NAFRA's first time we spoke, and GA was one of the first, along with Tiger and Great Hill Partners as well. And recently we saw a big inflow of capital, and on the VC end, it was later, around 2009. Matthias, my partner here in the audience, started going to Brazil, was one of the first ones to go together with Jeff from Redpoint, and was the first one to commit with a team and a fund for the region. And we saw a lot of new energy in terms of knowledge and money go into the country the last 3 years for the earlier stage of the development cycle of companies. So I think we are well positioned. It's definitely for anyone that is more than 5 years doing this in Brazil. It's day and night. What we have today is a lot better than what we had before. But we are still in the beginning, so I think it's very promising, and there's a lot to be good.
Alan, would you like to add to that?
Sure. I mean, I guess when you're the third one to speak, you always agree with the first two guys. I actually, to build on a little bit on each of your points, one around kind of the generations of entrepreneurs. I think Endeavor has done a lot of work now studying sort of the ecosystems and this idea of mentorship. And we actually have been able to show and track how the guys from Mercado Libre or, Romero from Gustave, or some of these more successful entrepreneurs who started out 10, 12 years ago, they're actually really important to the ecosystem now for the companies getting started today. So I think that idea of role models and examples, but then to actually go get involved as angels and mentors to the new businesses is something we've seen to be really important. To Anderson's point about it being very early, I think, I heard Fred Wilson give an amazing talk a couple of years ago about generations and sort of how this works in Silicon Valley, and he was using it to talk about New York. But I think you could apply it to Brazil, or you could apply it to Buenos Aires, where we're in the first or second sort of generation or cycle of this, where I think the future is huge. I think little ups and downs, or hey, maybe it's not as hot and sexy today as it was 6 or 12 months ago. I think the people who are in this for the long term are going to be in it for a very long time and are going to do very, very well. And so, when I look at Endeavor's own sort of portfolio, we've helped 72 of our companies raise about $300 million in equity in the last 24 months. That's more than we've raised in the previous 7 years. So there's very clearly something important happening, not just in Brazil, but in Mexico, in Argentina, in Turkey, in a lot of these emerging markets. And I think it's sort of just the beginning, or chapter 1.5. I don't know. There's a lot more to come.
So let me kind of lean into that in a way. One of the themes today, or one of the kind of recurring questions today was, why isn't there an Amazon of Brazil, other than Amazon, right? And so my question to you is, what happens, and this is, I guess, more the earlier, so we'll answer it this way, until the big check. But what happens if an entrepreneur comes to you and says, listen, I have this crazy idea, and it's build the Amazon of Brazil because Jeff seems to be busy with Kindle or something in Washington Post, we're going to do it. And I'll sort of maybe half answer that as initial. And I'd be, I'm not really sure how crazy are you. I mean, that's just going to determine that factor. Because as initial, kind of a smaller type of outfit, I am not necessarily sure I would want to try and fund an idea that big, necessarily. Okay, it really is dependent on the team and the founder and such. So I'm wondering, what would happen if somebody would knock on your door and say, listen, I've got this Amazon for Brazil idea?
Yeah, so this is a great one for Endeavor because we really want entrepreneurs to think as big as possible. In fact, it's one of the main things we do when we bring people here is we do these kinds of immersion and inspiration tours to try to get them to think even bigger. And I'll make a generalization that might make me unpopular in this room, but Brazilians don't think big enough. And in fact, we find entrepreneurs out of Turkey, out of Argentina, out of some of these other markets that really build huge regional, even global potential businesses. And Brazilians typically are building for Brazil. Now that's because of the
But is there anything wrong with that? Do you think? I mean, again, when we were speaking about the experience part,
yeah.
you need to, you need to develop experience first. Let's, figure this out on our turf, so to speak, before we go outside and think much, much bigger. I mean, Brazil is not small. I don't know if you've noticed, but I mean, we find it, super attractive. People ask me, what are you doing in Brazil? I said, there's 200 million of them. I mean, we're just starting, and it's huge, and it's amazing. It's the size of the United States.
Right. Well, I guess to your original question, if somebody came to us and said, we want to build the Amazon for Brazil or for Latin America, we would say, come on in, let's do it. We want people thinking that big. We have one entrepreneur in Chile and one in Jordan that are trying to build the Amazon for Latin America and for the Middle East right now. They're not Brazilian, but that's something that Endeavor is currently working on.
I'd love a deck. And Anderson?
I'll take the opportunity here to go back to the conversation we had many times about the copycats and take the flip side of it. I'll answer with another question. Can you explain to me why we don't have a Buscapé in the U.S.?
I mean, listen, I think there's a lot of cultural stuff. I think everybody looks at their own problems. And I think, in the United States, there's the luxury to think big. We're going to put a man on the moon by the end of this decade. And they pulled it off kind of well. I think there's a luxury to think of a franchise that can sell 1 billion burgers. I think this is a luxury. I think Brazilians have another luxury, and that is to reinvent the local economy, which I think is an incredible challenge. And I would be excited tremendously. We don't have that in this room. We're missing that. We have to go outside. To the rest, we have to come to Brazil. We have to come to the U.S. and elsewhere.
Yeah. So my point is, it comes with the evolution and with the opportunities. I'm not saying we will never have an Amazon in Brazil. With our barriers for, as we saw earlier today in the e-commerce panel, our challenges for payments and logistics are still very high, but they are going down. So at some point it might make sense. From a cultural perspective, the aspects of how Brazilians buy, the cultural needs to compare prices and to get the rebate, and it's just in the culture, and it made more sense for it to evolve as a price comparison early on, and let's see what comes next. But the fact is not Brazilians are not buying because there is no cultural inclination, nor there is no Amazon because there is no e-commerce future there. I think the evolution path is going to be completely different. It is already. Where we went up, it might be with a new Amazon or different flavors of it. But it's just a different place. Sometimes you can do a cultural, what was the name they finished? Information arbitrage or geographic innovation, whatever. Sometimes you just need to cater to the needs of the country with the results, the resources that are available at that time.
Okay. Right before you answer that question, because I want to twist it. Yes, prepare a question, because as soon as he's done, I'm going to ask you that question. So that saves me from forcing people to come up with questions. So my question to you is kind of downstream, right? It's rare to write a $50 to $500 million check. You're going to need some good candidates and pick up litter kind of a thing. We don't have litter, sometimes we even don't have one candidate. So how do you support us folks downstream? There's you guys, there's Atomico, there's Bessemer. Everybody's in there for writing a big check. these days, or a lot of them are willing to write a big check, but I'm not really sure, for whom. How do you make sure you have the right deal flow in a couple of years?
Yeah. Hey, come on. First, actually, I want to answer the Amazon question. That's because I'm not sure you want it. So, I mean, if you look at, I think it's a great question. I lived in China and Hong Kong from 2008 to 2011, and there is the Amazon of China, and that is Alibaba. And they've created an amazing ecosystem around it. And I think that was basically a couple of things. I think one was we had a really group of entrepreneurs that had big vision, right? I mean, Jack Ma, there's one thing that you can say about him, good or bad, is he has an amazing and grand vision. And he built a team of not just a few people, but like 20 partners. And that's, if you read the press today, some of the challenges that's going on with kind of the IPO listing is, he wants that management team to be in control of their destiny for the future. I think that really long-term point of view. So they could try and really build an even bigger and more promising kind of Amazon-like opportunity in China, not just in the e-commerce way, but in cloud computing and what the US is doing, in payments, like they're doing with Alipay, and really transform the entire Chinese economy. And I would not bet against them. I think to Anderson's point, there hasn't been, I think there's very few entrepreneurs that have had that vision. I've been pleasantly surprised that someone like Marcos and Lee has continued to kind of stick with it. He's incredibly detail-oriented, so while he's got a grand vision for it, he is sitting on the same floor of the UI team and is in there every day making UI changes alongside the engineering team in a way that I haven't seen with other entrepreneurs. So he's got big vision, but he's also very detail-oriented. And I think, that's that. If there were one company that could build that kind of vision, I think it could be someone like Lee and someone like Marcos that has really long-term aspirations for that business. But I think you have had the concept of people not necessarily thinking big enough yet, and Alan referenced it as well. And I think once that happens, there will be. Now, I won't, to answer your question on whether we will fund that or not, I quite frankly don't know I will, personally, because I think there is a risk profile to that idea that happens in Brazil that's different in the sense that similar to India, where you have many Brazilians really like them. They really like Amazon. They really think very highly of these global brands in a way that in China there's a very much domestic orientation, not just because they're very viral, but people don't have that same affinity towards these global internet companies. You look at the example of Facebook versus Orchid, right? Orchid was as close to a local social network as you possibly get because you had, almost 100 million, hundreds of millions of Brazilians and Latin Americans that could have created very, shame on Google for not innovating around it, but could have created that kind of local, regional brand, and it just got its butt kicked by Facebook because of the network effect and the global aspiration, and also the affinity of Brazilians and Latin Americans to a Silicon Valley brand like Facebook and what that could offer them technology. So I think that there's kind of two questions, but I think it may happen. I don't know. I'm not as convinced as I am in markets like China or others that there will be kind of an Amazon for that region. And then I think to Anderson's point, I think Alibaba longer term, those ideas and many of the Chinese ideas are bringing their way here. I mean, primarily Tencent is a $92 billion market cap company in the world. Alibaba is like a $100 billion company, and the ideas and things that they're bringing forward, despite people thinking about copycats, are well in advance of what Facebook and others are. There's a company called YY that went public last year, which is an awesome company, and it brings the idea that Skype wasn't really able to execute, or Airplane wasn't able to execute in terms of what Google and Hangout and kind of the collaboration that people are having. So I think there's going to be a lot of things. I'm hopeful that will come out of Brazil, and I'm hopeful that will come out of Latin America in general. I haven't necessarily seen it yet, but I'm hopeful that it will come. And to your question on kind of seeding that ground, I think the challenge is, if you look at the examples of, we've come a little bit closer to what would